Hi, I'm Farid Naib. I'm a serial entrepreneur, for want of a better term. My news company is DDC, which I started to really solve a lot of the problems I had as CEO of other companies that I've run and companies I'm on the board of. What DDC does, our first product in any case, provides a place to store all those documents you get when you run a business. The certificate of incorporation, your EIN number, HR reviews, leases, all that paperwork you accumulate and you need to have a place for. And what we do is more than providing storage, we provide kind of a smart filing cabinet, if you will. So if you put an insurance contract in there, the system will let you know, before the insurance contract matures that you need to do something with it. So that was our first product. We now have products as well for the VC and private equity community, and we just rolled out a product for limited partners, those people who invest in VCs and private equity funds. So it's going fairly well. We've got good traction. I think 4,000 paying users right now, about 30 paying companies. So it's getting to a point where we like it. Well, actually, the pain point is very specific that I started this company for. When I sold FNX, my last company, I had started FNX in '92. I sold it in 1998. I bought it back in 2002, and I sold it again in 2007 to the publicly traded French company, GL Trade. When I sold it in 2007, the paperwork was in real disarray. We couldn't find, for example, the income statements from the Thailand subsidiary. I can find all the HR agreements for the Japanese employees, the confidentiality agreements. And there was enough, things I couldn't find that the French firm, very rightfully so, asked for what's called a reps and warrants escrow, which they basically carved out $3.5 million and said, we're going to put it into a bank account just in case there's some problems that we couldn't find because we couldn't find all the paperwork. Now, I ended up being responsible for that $3.5 million personally, and the French firm was very good. I didn't take a hit on it. But at the same point, I thought, well, I could have really done a better job on all this stuff, but if only I'd had a system to do it. So I created that system. Well, the team's an interesting thing. I would much rather have a company with a great team and a mediocre idea than a great idea and mediocre team. I think the team's really important. My first business I ever started was probably around 1973, to be honest, 1974, when I was 14. I started doing stage lighting for a local high school rock band, and they never paid me. So I started asking to be paid, and other bands started paying me. And this was Atlanta during that, in the 70s. And I ended up picking up a Willie Nelson tour. I toured, the Police came through, were booked through a local agency. So I toured with the Police on the first tour. I did the Sex Pistols first tour. So I did quite a few shows out of that thing, and I created a company called Spectrum Lights, which did regional touring for rock bands, well, really for all sorts of bands, primarily rock bands throughout the Southeast. So I learned a lot from that company. The bands that were doing the regional touring, the bands filling 3,000 to 5,000 seat halls, stopped touring so much in the 80s when MTV was really hot, and they started doing music videos instead of getting tour support. So that business kind of died, and I sold it and went to Wharton. Wharton was really good. What Wharton does, what these MBA programs do, is they teach you how to run a company. They give you exposure to accounting, to organizational behavior, to finance. Most people don't get to run companies when they get out, but certainly if you're doing an entrepreneurial thing, you do. The only reason I got into Wharton, I got in when I was 22 for MBA, which is pretty young, is because I had such a weird, background. I had done all the lighting stuff for all the rock bands, and then I spent a year working for IBM doing software science, and I wrote a couple papers that got published. So I think Wharton took me in because of my weird background, as it were. But I learned a lot there, and it was funny. Some of the courses that I paid almost no attention to when I was at school, when I started, when one of my companies started getting big, I went back to and really kind of dug into, the organizational behavior, which I, thought was kind of worthless when I was in school, but turned out to be the most valuable course I took. Firms tend to plateau. They plateau at $2 million, at probably $5 million, at $10 million, at $20 million. So how you break a company loose out of those plateaus and grow is one of those things that are very difficult to do, and you just really have to learn by doing it. I don't think you can really teach teach how to make that transition work, as it were. I see a number of companies that get stuck at one plateau or the other, and it's really the art of changing the management team, changing the procedures to get to the next level. That is, it really is an art. It can't be taught, or is not taught yet. Well, what happens is the people that are that help you grow to 2 million, as hard as it may be, are not the people that will help you grow to 10 million. And I'll give you an example. When I started at FNX, I had this great CTO. And he would go there and he would work 3 days straight and create this great product, and we'd show it to the bank and they would love it, and we'd get to the next level. As the company got bigger, we hired more developers, and he would still come in and he would work 3 days straight and then not show up for 2 days because he was recovering from his work jack. And that was great, except the other developers weren't really led at that point, and there wasn't the discipline of doing things. So while he was absolutely crucial to getting up to a $2 million stage, from $2 to $10 million, his importance was not there, and he couldn't really be the CTO because he couldn't adopt to the more structured way that a larger firm needs to operate. So that's an example, and it's pretty much everywhere from finance to operations. You have to change your team, change your structure as you get bigger, and it's difficult. Well, first of all, being an entrepreneur is like having a term paper due every day. You basically, there's always a little bit of panic and stuff you haven't done. But it's never boring. Your job is never boring. You never get into work and say, I'm just bored and don't know what I want to do. There's always something urgent that needs to be doing, and it's anything you do is really you see the fruits of your own labor. You're not a cog in middle management at some place or the other. You're actually driving your business forward, and whether it makes it or doesn't is kind of up to you in a way. So that to me is interesting. When I first got out of grad school, I wanted to be a consultant because I thought consultants went in, solved problems and had interesting problems to solve and did this and that. I found out that largely wasn't true, but it certainly is true if you're an entrepreneur. Well, the entrepreneur model right now in the U.S. is somewhat broken. There's a problem in funding these companies. We kind of swung too far in the late 90s and funded pretty much things that didn't need to be funded. But now, since the stock market's been so bad and there hadn't been a lot of exits, good ideas are not being funded, and companies will spend a large amount of their time in chasing funding as opposed to growing their business. So right now, it's a very difficult environment for startups just due to the lack of ready capital out there and meaningful capital, as well as I think some of the business process discipline that could be brought to these smaller companies is still not there, which also causes problems. So it's a very difficult time to be an entrepreneur given the fundraising environment. At the same point, if you can secure funds, or if you're self-funded, kind of like I am, it's a good time because you can go out and hire people reasonably cheaply. There's a good labor force out there. If you can avoid raising capital, at least initially until you have traction and have some serious revenue, it's great because raising that capital will take you a long time. And you'll be working on raising capital more than running your business or creating your business, as it were. So it's, do you want to be out there selling your product and doing well, or do you want to be raising capital? Now, when VCs do bring in capital, picking a VC that actually can provide some strategic help is more than just the money is pretty important. Though once you do raise that capital, you will end up with board meetings, and rightfully so. The VCs want to look after their investments. They may get involved operationally, et cetera. So some of the joy of being an entrepreneur and kind of doing what you want, taking your own direction, once you have outside investors, you have partners, and they have a say in what you do. So it changes it a lot. So early days, if you can avoid taking capital, do. And if you do take capital, make sure that people bring something to the table other than just the money.